Let's talk about E3 2020. This is actually a big write-up from GameDaily.biz, and just a reminder, if you're hanging out over here in the chat and you want to read along with the stories that we're going to be talking about on the show, you can type !show notes in the chat. You'll get a link to our doc that we're using. If you're watching over on YouTube and you want to read the stories that we're using, you can look in the description below. There's a link out to the show notes that links to every single article that we reference on the show. So, just to give a little love to the creators here. But this is from Mike Futter over at GameDaily.biz. And it says, E3 2020 pitch proposes overhaul with Qtainment, new floor plan, industry-only day. I'm not going to read this. We're likely going to talk about this at length tomorrow during PvA radio, so you definitely don't want to miss that. I am going to hit some of the highlights. So essentially what happened is this pitch deck from the lobbying, from the ESA, leaked. And this was basically just the like, hey, it's a 27 slide pitch deck. That's like, hey, here's our proposal for the new direction of E3 2020. It looks like this right here because I'm using this dark mode. It's not that this slide deck was put together this poorly. Although I would argue it was put together semi-poorly. I'm going to turn night mode off really quick. Just because there's a lot of words, and whenever you're doing slide decks, you don't want fucking paragraphs. Like, give me the highlights. All right, let's not go blind. Anyway, so this 27 slide pitch deck leaked and proposes kind of a new direction for E3, and I do want to make sure we hit like the overview philosophy of what they're trying to create. So let me all right. E3 is changing. One of the slides reads, quote, "We're planning to pivot to an event focused on core gamers, online influencers, celebrities, and media with an emphasis on high-flow game pavilions, new programming, and branded curated experiences centered on a theme," end quote. And so the change in direction, and they do a good job explaining this in the pitch deck here, I think, about what E3 used to be. Maybe that was somewhere else. But essentially, the argument was, look, E3 for the longest time used to be a kind of retail, inside baseball, B2B event where you would have these retailers come, they'd see the new products that were coming out, they'd see the new games that were coming out, and they would be able to go back to their stores and hype these things up. People higher up the chain would be able to make decisions about what inventory they wanted to carry, how much of whatever they would want to order. Like, it was a very, very industry focused event. A lot of the presentations were given to stakeholders in the companies, and like, we went back right after E3 this year and we watched something from just like, I think it was like 7 or 8 years ago at E3, and just how different it was. It was like a bunch of guys in suits with a projector, you know, scrolling through a bunch of slide decks talking about bar graphs of sales and projections and blah blah blah, because it was an event where these companies would come and pitch themselves to retailers and give updates to their shareholders and stakeholders in the companies. Obviously, that has completely changed, especially over the last 5 years, and especially in this generation where it is less about this B2B sales. It's less about updating the status of your company, of your publishing arm, of your studio, and much more about like, hey fans, check out this 45-second trailer for Gears 5. Get fucking excited about this. Did you get it? And on to the next thing. Let's talk about everything that's coming in the next 2 years. Let's get people really, really excited about the stuff that's going on. And so with that changing focus, I think the ESA has always been a little bit slow to kind of embrace what E3 has become. And if you read this article from GameDaily.biz, which again, I highly recommend people go and do because there's just a lot of great detail in here, you'll see some of the things that the ESA is pushing back against, but you'll also see some of just like the slimy, shitty language that marketing people have to use in order to communicate what they're trying to do. So essentially, and we'll get into that here in just a minute. I feel like I'm a little scattered, a little all over the place in this conversation. Here's the highlights. Here's the big things. They want to change. So, as you guys know, E3 is not the on-stage presentations. E3 is the show floor. There are things that happen around E3 that are branded around E3, like, hey, it's Xbox's E3 presentation, it's Sony's E3 presentation, it's Nintendo's E3 Direct. Like, it's branded around E3, but what E3 actually is the show floor. Hey, here are the exhibits, here are the presenters, here are the things that you can expect to get your hands on, here are the people you can expect to see and to interview. It is all about the actual on-site event that, you know, you see the IGN and GameSpot and other YouTube channels covering from the floor. And so when we're talking about this, we're not talking about a change in the structure to the actual presentations, which many people fan side consider to be E3. We're talking about the show floor. So you'll see that here is the West Hall of the Los Angeles Convention Center and the proposed layout for this center. And I'm trying to remember what this one is, what this image is. Sorry. This is the West Lobby. Was this year's? Anyway, let's focus on this because I think this is where yeah. Here, this is the proposed floor plan for the West Hall. This is 2018's floor plan for the West Hall. So let's start here. Actually, you'll notice like each company is kind of given a block of space. Like, okay, here's where you're going to be able to set up. You've got Nintendo of America. You've got Oculus. You've got these smaller booths that are for indies, reserved areas which are likely for like media people. You know, you've got the GameSpot area here. So they're doing away with this, and they want to move to a floor plan like this. So these are experiences right here. So these will be stages or maybe hands-on experiences that people will be able to go to and either participate in or just be able to watch while they're standing in line for you know, hands-on demos of games, to be able to look at new products that are coming out. E3, to be transparent, I've never been to E3. It's a dream of mine. I want to go to E3 someday, or I've wanted to go to E3 someday. But with all of these kinds of events, there is very much so it is a hurry up and wait around, you know, hurry up and stand in line. Like, everybody rushes to go get their hands on the latest unreleased game, go see the latest unreleased product, and it's a lot of standing around. And so what the ESA and what E3 is hoping to do is they're saying we want to be able to market to the people that are standing in line by giving them this Qtainment, as they call it, this entertainment that's taking place while they're standing in line. They can passively take it in, you know, and they mention things like game tournaments, like interviews with influencers and creators, you know, charity events, all of those kinds of things, like being a part of this experience. And that the people who are actually given access inside of those experiences will be people who hold like VIP passes, VIP tickets that they'll sell at I imagine a premium cost. And so they're just trying to leverage the fact that they know that like there are people who are coming to this who are like, damn, we came for an entire day of E3 and maybe got to play 3 games and hours and hours of standing around. Well, while you're standing around now, you're going to be able to take in different experiences. And so that's one of the bigger changes to it. And going hand in hand with that is the continuing of the move to being a more consumer-centric event. And it only makes sense, and it's funny because the ESA is really like pushed back on being a consumer-driven event. But we live in a world today where information does not have to be distilled by outlets. It does not have to be distilled by creators. Information can really be distilled either directly from company to consumer or from company to trusted influencer to consumer. And so like this kind of old media guard, while it still is important and relevant, is being slowly pushed out because there are so many other channels that you can communicate through. It used to be that all these companies would hold their big news to E3, wait for E3 to come around, and boom, that's where you drop it. That's where you talk. That's where you show it, because it was the easiest place to get your message in front of the people who distill your message. But now, with the rise of social media, with the rise of YouTube, with the rise of direct-to-consumer, direct state of plays, inside Xboxes, games companies are a little less handcuffed to these kinds of events where they have to kowtow to, kind of the old guard media. And we're seeing less and less news coming out of E3. We're seeing less and less reveals coming out of the E3 because companies are realizing like it does not make sense for us to step on each other's toes to talk about the news that we want to communicate to our audience when we know that 10 minutes later another company is just going to reveal something that's going to overshadow that, and then 10 minutes later somebody's going to announce something that overshadows that as well. And so companies have backed out of that, and what we're seeing more is like, hey, in the month leading up to E3 there's more reveals, there's more announcements, there's more blog posts, there's more directs, there's more trailer releases, things like that. And so it's becoming less of an industry side focused thing where you're servicing retailers, you're servicing your B2B industries, where you're servicing and kind of massaging your relationships with the old guard media. And they're realizing like we need to make this more of a festival style thing. We need to make it more of a Gamescom event style thing. We need to make it more like the PlayStation experience where gaming fans can come and get their hands on these things and be vocal supporters who go out from that event, because we're in a world now, and this is like a common thing in marketing today, where people do not trust brands, rightfully so. Brands do shitty things. If you read through this deck, you'll hear a lot of shitty things the ESA says. You'll notice that they say, where was it? I'm going to find it. Where is it? It says, this is from the article, it says the lobbying group says it hopes to create, quote, exclusive appointment-only activations for select attendees who will create buzz and FOMO, end quote. Fear of missing out. Like, we do a lot of shitty things for marketing. We try to play into the human psyche and into the, that fear of missing out. And so that's something the ESA is trying to do. But the way that the people that we trust are so much different now. Like, yes, there are people who read IGN and GameSpot or go to Metacritic, look at the Metacritic score, and that's where they get all of their news from. But there are so many people now who look to people on YouTube, other kinds of, podcasters, people who don't necessarily belong to that old guard media to get their news, because, hey, I trust this voice that I know more than I trust some sort of like disembodied voice that's typing an article out to me on some sort of website. Now, not saying that's exactly how I am, but it's how a lot of people are. Even more powerful than if, Greg Miller or Colin Moriarty or whoever the podcaster you listen to is, even more powerful than that is when your buddy comes up to you and says, yo, you got to try this shit. And so I think the industry understands if we can get more fans in here to come in, get their hands on these games, and give them like the insiders, give them the insiders experience, make them feel like, man, they're being let in on some big industry secret, and then let them go back to their hometowns, back to their group of friends to talk up the games that they played here, the experience that they had here. Number one, the publishers and the creators who are bringing their games to it have a positive runoff effect of people who are going back and hyping up their games and being those really like, yes, it's a small circle that they may be communicating to, but it's really powerful and impactful if you can get people going back to their friends and saying, you got to try this shit. When you go to a restaurant and you ask the waiter, hey, waiter, what's really good here? And they're like, oh, you've got to try the calamari plate. And he walks away and your friend's like, fuck the calamari plate, dude. It is all about the surf and turf. You look at him, you look at that waiter when he comes back by and you say, we'll take the surf and turf. Because it's the power of word of mouth. from the people you are closest with and that you trust. And it's really good for the ESA's public image and brand for E3 because let's face it, that public image has been shit and it continues to be shit. And I'm going to hit on some of that shit here momentarily. But in their minds, it works good if you create a big event that is not just about standing in line, but it's about this Qtainment where you're standing in line and you're watching celebrities do shit. You're watching cool things get announced. You're like, you go back home and you talk to your friends and you're like, yo, you guys got to hit up E3 with me this next year. It was so fun. It was tight. Like it doesn't feel corporate. It doesn't feel, trade showy. It feels more like an event. So I think this benefits both of the key players, both between like publishers and creators and the ESA itself in creating this Qtainment idea. Couple other interesting things of note here. There was talk about wanting to pay celebrities and influencers in there. The ESA actually pushed back on that and said they would rather like go through an influencer organization and allow people to come for like charity sponsorships, which when you first see that, it's like, oh, well, good guy ESA. They'd rather like give to people than line the pockets of celebrities. But then you see this slide right here, the power of good, where they argue that the reason we want to do that is because we understand that millennials and Gen Z are the most giving back and social good generations ever. And by amplifying E3's social good brand, we can advance the industry's brand with consumers while storing positive chits for future use. And again, this shouldn't come as a surprise to anybody ever that companies, even when they do good things, are doing it likely for the wrong reasons. But they want to have celebrities come and operate on behalf of a charity because in the ESA and in E3's mind, like, oh, if we can get, this NBA player, and that's the example they give, talking about whatever it is that they support, then that's chips in the pocket for E3. Like that's good PR for them. And I love this. The third bullet point. One tactic we can implement is partnering with influencers, celebrities, athletes, YouTube personalities who are passionate about E3's relevant social good efforts. Gender equality, STEM. Like they don't list any specific organizations that they work with or anything like that. It's just like, gender equality and STEM. Like those are some things. We think that's good. The ESA and E3 has a long climb ahead of it. I think that they are going to be able to exist for at least a few more years just based off of people's excitement around E3 as an event. But look, another thing that they talk about in this is like there's going to be an app that people can use, and that app is going to be the way that they'd be able to like claim what experiences they want to go to and pay for those. They can like, there's going to be something like a Disney Fast Pass that you'll be able to buy so you can like jump to the front of the lines at certain booths. And, part of the reason that they wanted leverage an application like that is because having data about what booths are people interested in, what games are people engaging with on the app, what news gets people to react and share, that's all data that they can turn back around and offer as an incentive for companies to come and set up a booth there. You can look at, Yacht Club games and say, hey, Yacht Club, not only can you come and have a presence at E3, but look at all this data we'll be mining from the attendance here that will then be able to give back to you that you can then leverage for your own marketing purposes. Oh, it turns out that a lot of people who looked at supermassive games really are interested. Like there's a lot of people who looked at supermassive but also came and checked out Yacht Club games. So you can start to build an advertisement campaign around, oh man, everybody who was interested in the Man of Medan needs to get ads for this Yacht Club game. And this is a terrible example. Those two things are pretty unrelated, but the point being, like, it's another thing that the ESA can gather data from and deliver to participants on the show floor, to people who set up booths. And I don't know, like the ESA has a very uphill climb after the leak of all that sensitive personal information from media people and creators, leaking phone numbers, addresses, like putting people in actual danger with the information that they've released. And this pivot, I don't think, is divorced from that idea, from that fact that they understand and they recognize and they know, like, we fucked up. We got to get it back somehow. And so we're going to rebrand E3. And not rebrand E3, but like we're going to pivot the direction of what E3 looks like in order to we're going to lean into the social good. We're going to make it like appointment entertainment. We're going to lean into people's fear of missing out. Like, and this is not uncommon language we see in the marketing world, but like, I guess seeing it laid out in front of you just makes it feel so much more slimy. But I would highly encourage anybody who, is interested in this stuff to go read this write-up from GameDaily.biz. I'm actually going to drop the link in the chat here on YouTube. On Twitch. But if you're watching on YouTube, link to it is in the description below. Just click on the show notes. You'll find a link to all the stories we're using tonight. And just so you guys know how that works, let me show you real quick. This is the show notes it takes you to. You can get to this exclamation point show notes in the chat over on Twitch. And each page is a different episode. Latest episodes at the top. You can just click on the links as so, and it'll take you there. So anyway, I don't know. Interesting stuff, slimy stuff, but definitely something to keep an eye on as we move into E3 2020. In a little under a year.